Right folks, so the RTX 50 series officially hit shelves. I hope you all had fun attempting to grab one, assuming you've got just over 2 grand sitting around to throw at the GPU. If not, don't panic, because here's the good news. Older generations are still very much alive and kicking, especially with the improvements in DLSS tech that NVIDIA hasn't restricted to the latest and greatest. Now, I won't bore you with the nitty-gritty technical stuff because this is a build video, but let's just say we've come a long way since the days of DLSS 1 when your screen looked like it was smeared with butter. DLSS 4 with the new transformer model? Well, it's like comparing a Michelin-starred meal to the same meal 3 hours later after a night of heavy binge drinking. You get the idea. Yes, there's still valid criticisms about these features being vendor locked, but let's not forget, seeing this kind of tech trickle down over 6 years after the 20 series launch is a win in my book. So, what are we building today? Well, you're watching me kit out an Aorus B450 ITX motherboard with a brand new Ryzen 5 5600, a 512GB NVMe SSD and a shiny new 32GB kit of 3200 Mbps RAM. Now, why an ITX board? Simply because it was the only one I had on hand that supports both 12V and 5V ARGB, allowing for full software control over all the RGB goodness. And for the case? Oh, I'm glad you asked. Enter the legendary Cooler Master Q300L, the ultimate LAN party case. Compact, ridiculously well built, and with airflow that would make most full towers jealous. I've already pre-prepped it with 5 ARGB fans and a 700W Thermaltake PSU, which is more than enough to power this build. Cooling wise, I've got a 120mm Cooler Master AIO ready to go. I absolutely love this cooler, but since it's 12V RGB, compatibility is a bit limited, which is why I stuck with the ITX board instead of upgrading to M80X. So let's get everything installed and move on to the pièce de résistance. Here it is, the NVIDIA RTX 2080 Ti, and yes, it's a blowout card. Now I know what you're thinking. Why? I'll have a separate video detailing how I serviced it, but here's the short version. I originally planned to water cool this beast with a Kraken G12 bracket. Unfortunately, the kit I ordered didn't include the right mounting hardware, so instead I decided to lean into the blower design and go super compact. Yes, blowout cards aren't as quiet as the ones with axial fans, but here's the advantage. They don't exhaust heat into the case, which is perfect for a small build like this. We lose a few percentage points of performance compared to water cooling, but with some tweaking, it's really just single digits. Stock settings in heaven, as expected, the card hit max temp and throttled a bit. That's normal for this card. The 15C delta between the core and hotspot is about as good as it gets. This Dell OEM MSI Aero rebrand is really only good for around 225W continuous dissipation from the cooler compared to the 250W 2080 Ti TDP. NVIDIA actually stopped AIBs from making blowout cards after the 3090 launch, but their external exhaust makes them great for workstation and dense environments, so everyone kind of ignored them and kept making blowout cards. The 2080 Ti in general performs more like a 3070 to a 3070 Ti, so we'll treat it as such. 1440p with shadowplay recording. I used 3D Mark to lock in a sweet spot for this card. After about an hour of tweaking in Afterburner, I settled on a 75C thermal limit and 98% power limit, prioritizing power to stabilize noise and FPS. And now for the fun part, gaming benchmarks. Let's start with Fortnite, and in the max settings including ray tracing it averaged 73 FPS. Shadowplay did drag performance down slightly, but overall this was an exceptional result. In Horizon Forbidden West, running at very high settings, the 2080 Ti managed an average of 64 FPS. For a single player exploration game, that's more than enough, and if you really want you can easily double that to over 120 FPS by tweaking a few settings. Now, Black Myth Wukong at high settings with low ray tracing averaged 47 FPS with FSR frame generation enabled. Without it, it dropped to 31 FPS. So yes, FSR feels like cheating, but it makes the game playable, and it's a fantastic showcase of how demanding modern titles can be. I mean, yeah, sure, 1080p is always an option, but I feel that you give up a lot of that crispness, especially as you still need to use some form of upscaling. Control, the OG ray tracing game, still holds up beautifully. At 1440p, the 2080 Ti just edges out the 4060 Ti in the same configuration. And I'll just leave it at that. Dragon Age the Veilguard runs, well, it runs superbly with about 80 FPS in the vast majority of situations. I did choose a scene at the very beginning of the game that is very visually demanding, and here the FPS did jump up and down a bit with 67 FPS on average, but at no point did the game feel choppy or unpleasant. Assassin's Creed Mirage performs surprisingly well with an average of 78 FPS, and yes, Ubisoft's notorious optimization quirks still hold this back slightly, with the CPU being the bottleneck. Now, Cyberpunk 2077, this one really shocked me. The 2080 Ti hit nearly 50 FPS at high settings. Somehow this blower card outperformed a water-cooled 2080 Ti I tested previously. This is most likely due to the newer patches, but hey, I'm not complaining. And that's it for today's build. The 2080 Ti might not be cutting edge anymore, but paired with a mid-range setup like this, it's still a brilliant performer. If you enjoyed this video, drop me a like and let me know in the comments what build you'd like to see next. Until then, happy gaming and I'll catch you in the next one.